lot of ground to cover, not a lot of time. 3 tonight.
The end.
My only friend, the end. We did The End, we did It's a Terrible Life, we did Meat Swap.
Strange bunching, but there you go.
Not that strange, though.
I don't know. So, the end was Zechariah zaps Dean into 5 years into the future. Dean meets up with his future self. Really good acting on Jensen Ackles' part.
Yeah.
Well, both of them really. Like, they both just did outstanding jobs in this episode. It was very surreal because the whole world was just complete shit because of the Croatoan virus, which makes people zombies. But it was the whole global pandemic, hot spots, like all these phrases that we've been hearing for the last 9 months. I haven't been to the office in 9 months. I haven't been to the office in the length of a pregnancy.
Oh, jeez. And of course, spoiler alert, it ends with the golden advice. By the way, when you get back to your time, stock up on toilet paper.
Which came from Chuck.
Oddly enough. That stuff is gold. Granted, the whole toilet paper pandemic lasted all of, 3 weeks? Maybe a month?
Yeah.
But
still.
It was a thing.
There were a lot of similarities. I mean, after effects of rioting and looting.
Can't not relate.
But anyway, solid episode. The whole point was to show what'll happen if Dean doesn't say yes to Michael.
Supposedly.
So, but Sam in this future had said yes to Satan. So when we see Sam in this future, he's Lucifer. And he had this great monologue. So good, because it was Lucifer talking about, telling the story from his perspective about his fall.
Yeah.
My crime was I loved God.
Right.
Then he made you hairless apes, and he told us angels to love you more than him. And I said, I can't.
And for that, he had Michael cast me down.
But you see, like, the way he talks about about man, he's twisting his words.
Obviously.
And my point was, I'm like, well, God never told them to love mankind more than God. God would never say that. But it occurred to me that there could be willful misinterpretation. Go down there, serve them, help them.
Mm-hmm.
The devil is the king of lies, and he knows how to twist and manipulate the truth.
Exactly. His interpretation of the events, while it may not be what he believes, it fits what happened enough to make it believable.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't say, love man more than you love me. He said, stop being here, go there and serve them, help them, love them. Never said more than me, but that's what Lucifer heard. Or that's
what he claims he heard.
Mm-hmm. He had full knowledge of the situation. He chose not to accept it.
Yeah, and I love Dean's comeback insofar as, he's like, don't give me the sympathy for the devil crap. And he's talking about, you're just like all of the rest of them being the demons.
Oh.
You just have the biggest ego. And that's exactly what it is.
It is, and it was interesting because I felt like Lucifer could have cut back at Dean with the same claim. You're just like the rest of man with a bigger ego. That fits Dean.
That's why Dean won't say yes to Michael.
Until he does.
But not until much, much, much later.
Right.
Which was just, that was like, season 14, a little bit into 15? It was the end of season 14, the beginning of season 15, I think.
Wow. Okay. But yeah, and man, Jared Padalecki's acting in all of that was just great.
Yeah, and Jensen Ackles being his future self and his past self was amazing to behold as well. Like, they just did such a good job.
I have to credit the writers more than Jensen Ackles because he really was the same guy. But the things they were saying to each other fit with the different experiences that they had had.
But there is a subtlety. It's not going to work.
Not to take away from him. But.
Yeah, because he played both. He delivered both sets of lines. Like, you're watching this episode and you're not taken out of the story. Like,
no. You
really do believe that you're watching the future and the past interact.
Yeah, you're seeing two separate characters.
You don't... at no point did I have that... Oh, well, we're looking at the back. Or like, I never got taken out of the story.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Zachariah, after the confrontation with Lucifer disappears. Zachariah comes, zaps Dean back, and he's like, you're going to say yes now? And he's like, no, not going to do it. Nah.
And I had that moment watching it when I wondered if this was a vision of the future or a vision that the angels created. And that exact moment was when future Dean said to our Dean, gotta say yes. Mm-hmm. If I was in your position, I would say yes 1,000 times. Like, everything else was perfectly seamless, totally believable. Cass being all that was hilarious, potentially believable, but it was that moment when future Dean said, you have to say yes, that it was like, oh, this is a timeshare thing that I keep forgetting his name.
Zachariah?
Zachariah is putting on. It's all just a fictional vision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then we decided to watch It's a Terrible Life.
Because this episode had a lot of It's a Wonderful Life feel to it. Yeah. So we decided on that.
Yep. And it was fun because it starts and Dean is corporate guy.
Corporate douchebag.
High-level corporate douchebag. And, rice milk lattes and cleanses and, making the deals. And I love it because his name in this alternate universe is Dean Smith and Sam is Sam Wesson. Smith and Wesson. Like, not real subtle there.
Odd for Zachariah to play with the gun motif.
Well, in Zachariah, that was our first introduction to him.
As it turns out. And we didn't even remember that.
Not entirely, but I feel I think I do have a very vague recollection. It might be superimposing, but I think I remember watching this episode, first introduction to Zechariah, and it's the guy who plays Woody in Psych, and we're like,
Woody.
oh, Woody! And I remember thinking, oh, it's one-off thing, right?
Right.
When he first appears, because he's like the boss, or like,
yeah, because there was that whole thing with the Uriel angel.
Yeah.
Who kind of went a little bit rogue and was a little bit too aggressive, and so he was like, all right, I gotta go suss out the situation.
Yeah. So it was basically just a big test to see. So you got Sam working IT and having dreams of his actual life, and Sam doing the whole, I think I meant for more than this, and Dean doing, I don't believe in destiny or anything, like, we just got to deal with whatever's in front of us. That part of their personalities didn't change.
Exactly. Nothing of their well, okay, yeah, some things of their personalities changed, but yeah, their actual personalities came through, and clearly some of their memories too. So
yeah.
It was really interesting to see what could be manipulated by Zechariah and what couldn't.
Well, it was interesting because Zechariah, when he revealed himself, it was so subtle because you didn't realize it until he did the forehead tap that the lighting was all like your standard, like, normal life sort of lighting. Mm-hmm. When he tapped the forehead, it went to that kind of grainy, dull color. Mm-hmm. It was so beautiful and seamless, like,
because you didn't realize it until that happened.
Yeah.
And it was basically the audience was in the same boat as the characters. They didn't. It may have seemed off, but you didn't realize it until the tap. Mm-hmm. Like, they had that moment of realization. We had that moment of realization at the same time that Dean did. It was real nice.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in watching the episode, you knew something was up.
Well, obviously.
And, I'm trying to remember the first time I watched it. I was like, is this all an act? Because, they did their whole ghost hunting thing without realizing it, that's what they were doing. The side plot was some ghost that was tied to the company and, company line. Side note, the guy that played Dean's buddy, buddy.
Sam's buddy.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Sam's work buddy, Ian, was played by the same actor who played the deputy mayor in Buffy.
Season 3, the one that gets stabbed by
Faith. With a wooden stake. Because she thought he was a vampire. Well, this guy in this episode stabs himself in the neck with a pencil. And I turned to Joe and I said, what's with this actor playing characters that get stabbed by pointy wooden things?
He just does a good job of getting stabbed by pointy wooden
things. Well, and I almost wonder if it's not a little subtle wink because, and the Ghostfacers were in this episode in a very, they looked them up online. Oh, these guys, they're geniuses. And they kept mentioning the Winchesters. Douchebag Winchesters, but they're the ones that said WWBD. Mm-hmm. What would Buffy do?
Good point. So
I wonder if that was a little...
I think it was. Especially combined with the what would Buffy do reference.
Very subtle.
Also, their involvement with the Ghostfacers drives home that all of this was real. Mm-hmm. This was a real place.
And Zachariah said that.
Yeah.
He's like, I dropped you. The ghost was, it was a real... Haunting. Everything else was real.
This was just to drive out that you're destined to do this.
Yes. So. And then it ends with Dean being like... Because we don't know at this point that there's this big, greater plan for Dean to be Michael's vessel and Sam to be Lucifer's vessel. Like that's not known at this point in the series. But so a little out of order, but good. So then we decided to watch Swap Meet. Not tied to that storyline at all yet. Because that one was before all of that happened, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
So
Swap Meet's definitely a one-off.
it is a one-off, but I think at the end of the day, it is a precursor. So Sam and Dean go... Well, it starts off with Sam walking into a bar, acting weird. Like, I'm 26. I would like an alcoholic beverage, and hitting on this older woman, like older than Sam even. Like, so Sam and Dean are in this town in Massachusetts because they're investigating a poltergeist at the newly purchased home of their former babysitter, someone who worked at a hotel that their father dropped them off at, and
right. Sorry, I was trying to remember if they had actually resolved that, and I just remembered that they did. But.
Yeah. Strange poltergeist activity, but then their daughter, probably like 14 years old, had carved into her stomach murdered child. It was like CHYLDE or something.
Mm-hmm.
So,
old-timey writing.
So, but that ended up being very much a side plot.
Yeah.
The whole crux of it was Sam gets body swapped with a 17-year-old kid. And it was a good episode, but they really should have kept... Because there were... So the very first instance we saw, the very first scene was Sam...
Jared Padalecki.
Acting like this teenager.
Right.
But then they didn't go back to that.
Right. For the rest of the episode, this kid hits Sam with a dart and body swaps him. But all of the acting was done by the characters, not the bodies, if that makes sense. It was...
Yeah. So Sam, whenever we saw Sam, like Jared Padalecki, he was dressed as Gary, the kid.
Right. And all the other characters around him saw him as Gary, the kid.
We saw him as Sam.
Audience saw him as Sam, Jared Padalecki.
There were some really cool mirror scenes where, he's looking in the mirror. Each time they would look in the mirror, they would see the bodies. So there was really good acting there with both the kid who played Gary and Jared.
Good acting, good cinematography.
Mm-hmm. But I think it would have been a lot cooler to have seen Jared Padalecki acting as Gary, not Jared Padalecki acting as Sam trapped in...
Right. It would have been a more fun acting exercise to see Jared Padalecki acting as a 17-year-old and whoever that kid was acting as Sam. Yeah, the inconsistency with the perception of the characters was a little... it was a decision they made, and...
I have to believe that they intended to go into this episode doing that.
Maybe they weren't happy with the kids acting.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I think it would have been better that way, but they didn't. Whatever. It's fine. You always like to see... Like, okay, we're seeing these ads for this movie Freaky that's coming out today.
Today. It's Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th. Ooh.
Interestingly enough, main character, Catherine Newton, is the actress. She played Cass's daughter, or Cass's host's daughter.
Right.
And she was supposed to be in this spin-off series that never came to pass.
Right. What was that called again? It had a name.
Something Sisters.
Okay. Presumably in this movie, because a 17-year-old girl gets body swapped with a serial killer guy.
Played by Vince Vaughn.
Played by Vince Vaughn.
So, I gotta see this movie. I have to. I know it's gonna be slashery. I'm fine with that.
Directed by the guy that did
Happy Death Day.
Happy Death Day, which I don't think I saw.
I think
we just saw the kill count, but it looked delightful. Anyway, presumably in this movie, you see Vince Vaughn acting as a 17-year-old girl. And
he is the perfect choice for that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you see a 17-year-old girl acting as a serial killer. And that's what this episode should have done.
Yeah.
But you don't see that.
Right.
The actors are playing their own characters, and it's kind of like, okay.
Yeah. But all that aside, good episode.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I think if we're right on the whole timeline, like when this episode came out in relation to the whole Michael Lucifer thing, a very subtle hint. But, I mean, yeah.
Because it plays the whole bodysuit thing, and...
Yeah.
Yeah. They did a good job of world building the whole bodysuit.
Yeah, because, and the whole crux of it is these kids were messing around with this demonic book, and Gary went into a trance, talked to a demon who told him there was a hit out on Dean, which is why when they showed up in town, he was laser focused on them, working at his
burger joint job.
Yeah, and the whole point was that they body swapped so that Gary could kill Dean and collect a reward. You're dealing with demons, there's no reward.
There's no reward.
And
Reward.
Sam was just like,
Stop. You dumbass. Stop.
So the Gary and then the girl Nora, who ends up getting possessed by a demon, but then she was fine at the end, whatever. They had tied him up, and he was like, Trevor, stop talking, you moron. And Trevor's like, oh yeah, I want $1 million. She's like, what about $10 million? And make Mindy Schwartz fall in love with me. Money and love, oh. And it's like, you're not.
It was so clear what was going to happen.
And she killed him.
Yeah, that dude actually died. And
there was no... I mean, he was a dick, but...
There's no fault. Like, the friends go back, and they're like, they're going to be okay. And it's like, their friend's body is in your basement, and his blood is probably still on her hands.
Yeah.
Like, there's going to be fallout. Those kids are fucked for life. But okay, yeah, sure, happy ending.
Side note, Gary's dad was played by the actor who played George's dad in Dead Like Me.
Thank you, IMDb.
Because I recently rewatched it, and I was like, oh, I recognize that guy. Where did I see him? Oh, yeah, okay. Anyway.
All right.
And he was also in an episode of Psych. Apparently, our theme tonight was Psych tie-in. So I said that the guy that played Gary's dad was in one episode of Psych.
Yeah.
Then Woody.
Oh, yeah, right, of course. Woody was in the other two. So that was our theme tonight. Yeah, Psych tie-ins. Nice. Great show.
Movies were okay. Yeah. Even the last one, Last Sea Come Home. Because they didn't do it. Anyway,
I think Lassie Come Home was better than the first one.
Yes.
Because the first one was completely effed over by his stroke.
Yes, I agree. But I'm still really upset with the lack of Sean doing his thing.
Yeah. Anyway, way off topic.
Yeah.
I think we're good.
Yeah.
Right on.